Okay, so let's continue to get some more practice using the pen tool. So I'm going to show you a method of outlining objects that I actually learned from another pretty famous illustrator. His name is Von Glitchka. And this method is called the clockwork method. It's kind of an abstract concept, but in practice, what you do is you take, let's say, this object right here of a rubber ducky, and you try to break down the profile or the outline into a series of ellipses that are kind of all put together. And on each point or each quadrant of that ellipse is where you would put an anchor point. So you can see I kind of made a rough outline of some ellipses or circles and the quadrants of where you would go about putting anchor points to get a nice smooth outline using the pen tool. So this is all predicated on trying to get the best look using the pen tool. The general rule of thumb with creating outlines with a pen tool is the less anchor points, the better. Anyways, let's give it a go. Let's practice using this method. I'm going to hit P for the pen tool, and like this says here, I'm going to start my anchor point in this approximate area. Let's go ahead and go this direction first. I'm going to click and drag and release, and make sure you are just working with a black outline with no fill. And then I'll come over to this point right here where the 6 on the clock would be. I'll kind of line that up. I can see where that path is going on that side. And then I'll come over right here and click and drag and release. Okay, so I'll zoom in a little bit on this last point. So right here we need to switch directions. Okay, so we don't want to have that smooth point. We want to have an asymmetrical point. So this is the case where we're going to try a cusp point. To do this, I'm going to hold down on the Alt key. I'll get my anchor point tool. I'm going to hover on top of that anchor, and then I'm going to click and drag. And now I'm creating a new direction line or control handle. I want to go this way, and it needs to be a little bit below the line. I'll release the mouse, then release the Alt key, and there we go. Now we have a line that is turning and going the other way. So I'll click and drag here and get this part. Then I'll come over here and I'll click and drag. Now what I need to make sure is that as I drag this point out, that I don't have this control handle go into the object. I want to make sure that it's slightly outside the object. And we can always come back with the white arrow and start adjusting these points or massaging the control handles. So if you don't get it perfect on the first round, don't worry. That's a common thing when you're creating vector paths, is creating the best ones that you can and then coming back with a white arrow and editing them. So here's the next one. And so I'm hitting this abstract clock right here at the 9 portion of the clock. And then I'll come down here to the 6 o'clock portion and click and drag. Remember, if you hold down on the spacebar as you're drawing points, you can actually move the points. And then if you release the spacebar, you can go back to adjusting the handles. So that looks good about right there. Okay, now I'm entering kind of another part of a clock. So right here, click and drag. And I'm always kind of looking behind at the path that's being created. Right there. I'll come over to here. So I can already see that there might be some things I need to go back and change, but I'm not going to worry too much. So I'll click once, and now I'm going to hold down on the Alt key, click and drag my new control handle, release the mouse, release the Alt key, and then I will go back to creating that part of the path. Actually go back. I think I can pull this one off with just one point. There we go. Okay, I need to create a cusp point, so I'll hold down on the Alt key, click and drag because I'm switching directions, release the mouse, release the Alt key, and finish the end of this beat. Come back over here, click and drag. All right, I have another cusp point right here, so I'll hold down on Alt, click and drag a new control handle. This one's a little bit smaller. Okay, so I'm continuing with the clockwork method, and then I'll finish up. I'll hover over this point, and this point is similar to our cusp point. So as I connect this, I actually need to hold down on the Alt key and click and drag a new control handle. This time I'm going to go the opposite direction. It's kind of weird. So I'm actually creating the other side of the control handle. So once I have it lined up, I can release. Now I'll do Command click. All right, so if yours wasn't that great your first time around, don't worry. Like other things, this takes years and years of practice. Don't feel discouraged if your vector path isn't looking too great. I'm going to come in and, like I said before, I can go around and kind of fix some of these other points. So like right here, I'm going to go ahead and click with the white arrow tool, and now I'll click on this control handle and I'll move that down. I'll come over to this control handle and move it out a little bit. Maybe I'll move this one in, click on that point, move that control handle in just a little bit. You can see we can actually come around and massage and modify these points. That's looking a little bit better. So take some time, use your white arrow tool, and see if you can make this as close to accurate of this little ducky as you can get. Okay, so we're just going to continue with our practice with the pen tool. This time I've broken it down into more simple step-by-step techniques of using the pen tool. So we're just going to briefly go through that. So over here, it's just the simple concept of whenever you make these short direction handles, also called control handles, you're going to make a short line. Those are pretty easy to do, and I think everyone can figure those out. As you do longer control handles, you're going to get a longer curve. Short handles are going to create short curves. Then we'll see if we come over here and we do a short handle and then a long handle, we're going to start seeing a longer and larger curve. And if we draw our handles very high, we're going to get very high and pronounced curves. Here's where we're going to get a combination where we're going to have an anchor point with a short handle on one side and a long handle on the other side. Pay attention to this because sometimes it can be a little confusing. I'm going to click and drag this first direction line, and then I'm going to click and drag the second direction line, but I'm looking at the back or the left side of that control handle. That's the one I'm going to match up first. Then I'll come back to the anchor point and look for that corner icon, which is also the anchor point tool. And then I'll click and drag again. And what I'm doing is I'm creating a new direction line. Then I'll come over here. I'll create the first direction line. I'll come back to the point, wait for that symbol to highlight, and then I'll click and drag a short direction line. I'll do it again. Click and drag. I'll look for the first direction line, okay, and then I see I need a longer one, so I'll come back to that and click and drag again, and I'll finish that over here. Click and drag the first direction line, come back to the anchor point, look for the corner symbol, click and drag again. Okay, as we went over in some earlier exercises, if we just click once with the pen tool and release, we're going to get straight lines. So this is the easiest way to work with the pen tool. Alright, so now we begin to get back into making a cusp point. So I'm going to click and drag and make the first direction handle. I'll click and drag and make that second part of the control handle. And now I know I need a complete direction change for this path. So I'll come back to that anchor point. I'll hold down on the Alt key and click and drag. And now you can see I've created a whole new direction line. I'll click and drag the next one, come back to the anchor point, hold down on the Alt key, and click and drag the new direction line. Make that one, come back to the anchor, hold down the Alt or Option key, and click and drag the new control handle. So now that you guys know how to create those new direction lines and change the direction of those direction lines, go ahead and try your best to finish the rest of these practice paths.